Welcome everybody to our presentation here and our webinar. We have special guest Dr. Logan Banks. Give me a second and I will switch us over to our intro screens here. So our webinar tonight is called Taking Osteopathic Medicine to the World with Dr. Logan Banks. Dr. Banks, thanks for being with us tonight. Here's a little bit of my bio. We're just going to put this up for the recording for anybody who's bored and they can hit pause and read it there. We got Dr. Logan Banks' bio. His is also much more interesting than mine. He is a family medicine professor, a professor of family medicine and obstetrics in Burundi. He is currently, at the moment, in Springfield, Missouri, kind of on an interim pause as he continues to complete his mission. We'll talk about it more here. Nobody associated with the planning of this has any disclosures or anything that we need to make of pertinent relevance. Our objectives tonight are going to be able to describe the factors that might attract somebody to practice international medicine, in particular in Burundi, identify some of the big hurdles that people might face when practicing international medicine, describe extra training that someone might need to be required to take practice to international medicine to a country like Burundi, and describe the health risks that someone might experience when practicing international medicine in a third world country like Burundi. And lastly, to explain what it's like to be the first osteopathic physician to practice in Burundi. So Logan, thanks again. That's quite the title, being the first osteopathic physician in an entire country. That's some pretty cool stuff. We are so grateful to have you and your expertise here in the middle, or I guess your southern Missouri. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you and to see you again and talk about international medicine and missions and Burundi specifically, and kind of what drew me there and what I'm doing there, and yeah, a little bit of my story. So I appreciate this opportunity.
I'd like to welcome everybody who's attending this conference live. A little bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat section, and I will try to work those in, and we'll try to answer those as the lecture goes. So feel free to ask questions at any time, and we'll do that. And then we also reserve some time at the end for any questions for Dr. Banks. So to get us started off, Logan, I'd really like to talk about where it all began. You know, what you and your family has done is incredible. I think the sacrifices you've made, and maybe we can get into some of those, have been great. But where did it first start? I mean, was this something that, in high school you decided to do? Or how does a physician just decide one day, you know what, I'm going to move my entire family to Burundi and we're going to practice medicine there from now on?
Yeah, it was a long process, and even a couple of years before we moved, I had not really heard of Burundi. So it wasn't like, I knew in high school that Burundi was in my future. I really didn't even know much about it until a couple of years before we got there. But yeah, going back to the beginning, I mean, I didn't even know. I felt like medicine was a calling on my life, and I felt like I was trying to follow God's will for my life, and State University in Kirksville, and right next door to KCOM, and learned about osteopathic medicine, learned about the philosophy, the tenets of osteopathic medicine. The mind and the body and the spirit are connected, and I already believed that as a Christian, and so that seemed to already fit with my philosophy. So I was on board with osteopathic medicine right away, and again, God kind of opened doors for me to get into medical school. So I got into the pre-osteopathic scholars program that Truman has with KCOM. So that was a huge blessing. And then in my first year of medical school, actually, I had the opportunity to go on a mission trip with CMDA and we went to Bolivia, and we were there for about a week or 2 weeks of spring break. And it was, yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. Went with some other first year colleagues and second year colleagues from Kirksville, and just had a great experience working in a clinic, seeing just another culture and what life was like for the people that lived there, what healthcare was like, how you could use medicine as a way to serve, which I had always been interested in. And so really from that time, I didn't necessarily know about missions being a part of my life, but after going on that trip, I realized that missions in some capacity was going to be a part of my future. I just knew that, and I knew that that was something that was going to be, yeah, something that was part of God's will for my life, was to serve and give back in some way. And I still didn't know what that looked like. And then I also got to go on a mission trip in my second year, and we went to Nigeria. We were there for a couple of weeks over the summer interim. And that trip was also with KCOM, was with the CMDA group. And yeah, I was a second year at that time. There were some first years and second years that went, and it was a completely different trip. And it was, I feel like physically and emotionally, it was a much more difficult trip, but it didn't turn me off. It actually turned me on to missions even more. And it made me realize that, you know, for example, on this trip, we were basically in the back. The other trip was in a clinic that was established, and we were just kind of plugged in a part of it. This trip was, we had a van that we had basically bought full of medicines, and we were driving to different sites to set up clinics and see basically as many people as we could from sun up to sundown. And it was exhausting physically, emotionally. At the end, I mean, at sundown, there were still, I mean, every day we would arrive, there were thousands of people that wanted to be seen. And at the end of the day, there were still hundreds that hadn't been seen. And it was a bit chaotic. People didn't want to leave. They didn't want us to leave, but we needed to go to the next site. And a lot of what we were doing felt really temporary, like we were putting Band-Aids on big gaping wounds. And so I came away from that trip really thinking that short-term missions has its place, but if I was going to really make an impact, you need to be there longer than a short-term trip. And so I felt like God was saying, if you're going to be somewhere, it might be more long-term.
I love that. That's very osteopathic of you. You know the difference between a Band-Aid and a cure, you know, or a full treatment. So that's interesting. You know, still during your medical school years, did you have any particular faculty support or any kind of mentors or anything that was kind of your role model or your mentor? Or was this something that was more internal?
Yeah, our CMDA group had faculty advisors in Kirksville that encouraged us and supported us, and there were some doctors in Kirksville that were believers that would host Bible studies and encourage us and help us, you know, think about these trips and think about what our careers would look like. So yeah, those were formative years and encouraging times. I think if you're thinking about mentors, and just to fast forward some of my story, then I did my residency here in Springfield, Missouri, where I am right now. I'm back from Burundi for about 6-month period, and then I did an international fellowship, and so the director of that fellowship was a big mentor. He had served long-term overseas in Africa, and yeah, just hearing, you know, encouraging words and hearing stories of what things were like for him when he was serving overseas. Yeah, it was inspiring and encouraging, and kind of filled me with faith in the possibilities of what, you know, that this would be possible and what it might look like. So that was a big mentor for me.
How long had you been in practice before you kind of made that decision that, you know what, I'm going to practice in Burundi? I mean, had you been out as an attending, or do you think that was something that formulated even in your medical school and residency years?
It was definitely developing in medical school and in residency. I had hoped to do an international rotation in residency, and it never worked out. And then this opportunity to be a part of this international fellowship after residency opened up. And this fellowship was based at Via Christi in Wichita. And so I was in Wichita for about 5 months. And then I was overseas in Africa. I was in Kenya at a hospital called Tinwek Hospital for about 5 months. And I knew, yeah, so I guess I did that fellowship because I thought about this possibility that I might be doing this long term. But I was part of the Primo program, which is a Missouri loan forgiveness stipend type program.
Right.
And that was tying me. I knew that I'd be in Missouri practicing for 5 years because of that. And I really thought about, should I try to get out of this? Should I, if you break these agreements, the interest on these loans is astronomical. And so, I felt like, should I try to get out of that? Or is that, should I stay and be a part of that and fulfill that obligation? It was a 5-year commitment. And I wrestled with that. And I really felt like the Lord said, I knew you were going to get into this Primo program, and I knew you were going to be tied down to Missouri, and that's part of the plan I have for you. I want you in Missouri, and I want you to practice in the States and get, better at medicine and develop your practice. And so I did that. I was in Springfield. I actually, after the fellowship, I was blessed to join the faculty at the Cox Family Medicine residency. So I taught there, and I was there for 5 years. And toward the end of that time, I didn't know if that was just going to be, and I encourage, one thing I did in the residency was encourage residents that wanted to go and do missions. And I was teaching and practicing those skills. And then, kind of like the calling, I felt like God was saying, okay, it's actually time to kind of get ready. You're going to be going somewhere. And so toward the end of that time, then I started exploring those other options. But that was, I was in the States for 5 years before we moved overseas.
So, and then you made that transition from being someone who was mentored to obviously where you are today, which is being a mentor for other people. So that's great. So tell me more about this decision to serve in Burundi. Is this something that you went home to your wife and said, hey, I want to go move to Burundi? Or how did you make this decision? Because you didn't just make this decision for you. This wasn't like I'm moving across the street to a different practice. You moved your whole family. You all left. You took young children with you. How did that decision happen? And I know your wife's really supportive of that. Has she always been that way?
Those are some good questions. So yeah, I think to answer the second question first, when I proposed, Julie said yes, and I was very thankful. And then we had to start planning a wedding, and so I was in my 4th year of medical school at this time when I proposed, and I had a rotation in medical school set up to go back to Bolivia, where I had served after that first year. And I wanted to go back. They had built a hospital. I wanted to see how the work had changed and what they were doing and be a part of it. And that was also around the time we were planning a wedding. And I had asked Julie about going on this trip, like, hey, what would you think? Would you like to go and be a part? And she was, kind of like, well, go have fun. It'll be, good. And I'll see you when you get back. But it was also conflicting with all of our wedding plans. And so we decided to take a step back and pray and think about what this would look like if we when we should get married, what it should look like, how it should go. And she actually came back to me and said, I feel like if we're getting married and you're called to missions, God told me basically I'm called to missions too. And I think we should go to Bolivia on this mission trip and get married while we're serving on this mission trip in Bolivia. So that's what we did. And it wasn't like this cool destination wedding. I mean, it was very cool, but it was a sacrifice. We basically were sacrificing the Western big extravagant wedding that you would have. And it was, we were serving the Lord on this trip, and we were dedicating our lives to each other. We found a missionary pastor down there that agreed to marry us. And we went through the paperwork and got legally married in Bolivia. So we have our marriage license is actually written in Spanish. So she wasn't necessarily on board at the beginning, but became fully on board and very supportive. But yeah, then when we left to go to Burundi, our kids were young. They were 4 and 6 years old when we left the country. And so, yeah, that was, you have to think about what that means for your family, what it means for grandparents. It's really hard on them. The cousins and aunts and uncles and loved ones that you're leaving behind. Yeah, we felt like this was, you're giving up some things, but you're also getting a lot. And, honestly, like the time that I have to spend with my family when I'm practicing in Burundi is great, because I live really close to the hospital. And in fact, I have some pictures. If I can share my screen.
Yeah, go for it.
I'll show you some pictures of Burundi and where we live. Okay, so this is my family. It's my wife, and these are my boys, Liam and Zeke. This is Julie.
Now, how old are they now?
Now they are 11 and 9.
11 and 9.
Yeah. So we've been gone 5 years, and now we're back. So each term with our mission organization called Surge is a 5-year term. So we're in between terms right now. So we've served the first 5 years, and we're planning to go back in January.
So they spent half their lives there.
Yeah. Right. Zeke was 4 when we left, so he's really spent over half of his life overseas. And I can't even imagine. I mean, I don't even think I got on a plane until I was probably 12 or 13. And, thinking about all the places that he's traveled and seen and done, it's kind of mind-boggling. But yeah, it's, but then you miss some of the cultural things too, that, he's not fully part of like American culture, but he's not fully part of Burundian culture. So you get this conflict. In fact, they have a name for it. They're called third culture kids. And it's a unique, cohort, this subculture of kids that are growing up outside of their own culture. So military kids, missionary kids, other, people that have this kind of lifestyle belong into this subculture. And it's a unique group. But this is the hospital where I work. This is just the courtyard and a part of the hospital. And this is kind of an overview of the area from a hill. So Burundi is basically built on a mountain, and this is near the top of the mountain. This is called Kibuye. And so I joined a group of about 6 or 8 specialist doctors that were there, and now the number's about 8 to 10 specialist doctors, American trained doctors that are serving there. And basically how I heard of Burundi and how I ended up there was when I was in Kenya during that international fellowship, I met a group of doctors that were also in Kenya. They were doing a different fellowship, and they were looking for a place where they could serve long term. They knew that that's the direction they wanted to go as a team. They wanted to go somewhere where they could teach, somewhere kind of remote where they could have the most impact, and where not a lot of other people were going, basically. So I got to Tinwek, and that was 2010. They were getting started there at the same time. So we spent about the first 6 months together, and we just got to know them and really just kind of loved that group of people. And when we left then and came back to Springfield for that 5-year period, we followed along with them. We actually supported them, financially supported them and prayed for them and stayed in touch with them. And then when we felt like, where would we go? They were, basically on the top of our list. And when we emailed them and asked, do you guys have a need for someone like me. And it actually was, yeah, just the way everything was orchestrated, it worked out really well for us they could really use the help that I could provide. Because as a full scope family practice doctor, then I can do inpatient adults, I can do peds, OB, C-sections. And one of the things that they realized so they got to Burundi in about 2013, after they did a 2-year fellowship there in Kenya. Then they went to, they came back for a year, figured out where they were going to go in Burundi. And so in about 2013, they arrived. And what they realized was that, just like I'm back in the States right now, when you leave, someone has to pick up that work, or that work can't be done. And so when the pediatrician left, then the ped service would shut down. And when the internal medicine doctor left, then there really wasn't much help to keep the internal medicine going. And so to have someone like me that can kind of be a utility player and fill in different areas really worked out well. That was kind of just an answer to prayer, that like we wanted to go there, and they were like, we could really use like your skills here. So we went out and visited in 2014, and then we were in language school in France for a year, because the language of Burundi is French. The hospital, the work that I do in the hospital is, I speak in French all day long. This is the Google Map view of Kibuye. And so this is the hospital here. There's a lot of this blue roof stuff is all pretty new construction. So there's been a lot of infrastructure going in the past few years. They went from about 100 beds to about 230. And we're going to have this, I don't know if you can see my mouse moving around on your screen.
Yeah, we can.
But this will be a new PEDS building when that finishes. And so that's going to add another 100 beds. So we'll be over 300 bed hospital. While we've got this Google Earth view, I'll also point out this is the solar field that was, donations basically helped us build, and it provides 24-hour power for all of the hospital, the incubators, the oxygen concentrators. And so I know MAOPS and several members within MAOPS helped contribute to this. And so this is a huge blessing. So I want to say a special thank you to MAOPS and to everyone in MAOPS individually who gave and supported towards this. And then this is kind of the local church. And this, just to give you context, this is a soccer field. This is, pretty decent sized field you can play soccer on. So this is the size and the scope. And down the hill here, this little red roof is my house that MAOPS also helped support us with. And we're really thankful for that as well. And part of the house, there's a basement attached to it so that we can welcome visitors. And so we're looking forward to welcoming some people from MAOPS that are interested in missions. I think I'll stop sharing my screen, and then we can talk some more.
So, when we're talking about mission work, obviously there's a lot of hurdles and a lot of problems that you've had to overcome to be here. What do you think we could learn from them, or what kind of hurdles, if I were interested in international medicine, what do you think some of the greatest hurdles that you've had to overcome to be able to do this, and what could we expect if we were to decide to do international medicine?
That's a good question. I think just knowing that that's, I think just knowing that that's what you want to do, and you really have to be sure, because it's not an easy lifestyle, and you're giving up a lot. But like I said, the payoff is really, it's worth it. Hurdle that every doctor faces in their practice, what type of practice they're going to have, where they're going to practice. You want to kind of take the time and really make sure you're making the right decisions about where you practice and what you do, what your lifestyle will be like, because that's going to be, a big part of your day is going to be what you're doing. And I think that some people in medicine, even when all that lines up, it's still hard and it can still be difficult. So I think that's just a hurdle that everyone faces. And then for missions, long-term missions especially, and I think, those short-term trips were really formational and helped me know that doing this long-term could make sense and could happen. So I think had I not done some of the short-term trips, it would be hard to just jump straight into like a long-term career change and say, I'm going to move overseas and live like that. So the short-term trips and then that fellowship that I did where I lived overseas for about 6 months helped me kind of get over that. Like, could this be done? The answer was like, yeah, we could, it is possible. You can make that work. And then financially too, because when you go into missions, you're giving up, you're giving up your practice. And so you're not making the kind of, you're going from a doctor's salary to kind of like a missionary salary, which is much different. And you're not earning it, like you have to raise support. And so it's a real humbling thing, but it's been neat to see how the Lord has provided and to live by faith. I mean, that's a huge hurdle. And it still is, because it's still, what I'm doing. But it's a huge blessing too, because you get to see, just the networking of people that are supporting you from all over, different walks of life, but believe in the mission or just wanting to support you, or knowing that they're giving to the Lord's work, is really that's inspiring too, to see that. But that's a big hurdle too. That was kind of a hard thing, especially someone who was earning and providing for my family in one way, and then to be a support raiser. I was supporting people in missions, and then to become someone who's being supported is a big shift. And so that was that, and it's something that it's you still wrestle with at times, but I'm just so thankful for the people that do support us, and just the opportunity to exercise our faith in that way with our family is it's a huge blessing.
Chris Bowles mentions that, Cox Health has been pretty supportive of your plan. How do you recommend other physicians approach their employer, with the idea of serving a long-term mission? Any advice you could give to people, or even short-term missions?
Right. I do encourage like residents that are in training to explore those options. While I think when you're in residency, you have a little bit more, you've got some rural options and some elective options. So if you're interested, you can take that opportunity then. But, and also as you're negotiating contracts, as you're going out into practice, you could talk to your employer about, okay, how, like what your time off will look like, and if they'd be open to you going on trips and what that might look like. Yeah, Cox and my colleagues here have been really supportive, and they basically said, like, when they knew that I'd be coming back for. So basically, the way my mission agency is set up, they want you to come back every. Basically 1 year out of 5 needs to be spent back in the States. And that's because they recognize that for you to be successful long term, you need to step away every now and then and kind of get recharged and refreshed. And then connect with your family, with your supporters, friends. And so Cox knew that was going to be necessary for me. And so they basically, we worked out an agreement for me to, when I'm back, come back in and help with the residency. So I just started about a week or two ago. So I'm back with the residency for about a couple months, about 2-3 months. I'll be here with the family medicine residency in Springfield. And it's a great opportunity to refresh my skills in Western medicine, because we have much different capacity at that hospital, even though there's a lot of things happening there and growth and change. Like, there's so many limitations too, just from the medicines and from the labs and diagnostic capabilities. There's no MRI or CT, and a lot of that. Like I haven't ordered a TSH in Burundi. Maybe you can't order it at Kibuye. And some of these things, like you have to go to another country, even if you want certain labs or certain treatments or medicines that aren't available in the country of Burundi. So then, it's like, oh, then when I'm back here and I'm talking with residents, they're like, yeah, I'm going to order a TSH on this patient. I'm like, oh yeah, you can do that. That's because I'm so out of practice of even thinking that way. Like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So it's good to put the Western medicine hat back on and think about what I'm going to, how to, because I do want to stay current with those skills and board certifications and hospital privileges and stuff. So Cox has been really helpful with all of that.
How do you feel your training over in Burundi is helping your students over in Springfield? Do you find ways to incorporate that, maybe make them think a little outside the box and not be so dependent upon, those tests in those labs?
Right. Yeah, because there is a tendency in Western medicine, and I mean, there's the joke of kind of people getting a CT scan on the way through the doors of the ER. And so I think just my presence and just the experiences that I come in with as I'm overseeing medical care, precepting residents, it kind of, just bubbles to the surface of like, it just is like, oh yeah, what would you do if you couldn't order this lab or you couldn't order this imaging? And really relying on your history and your hands as diagnostic tools. I mean, we say it here in America that the history and the physical is the most important part, and it's true. But then
we go and order all those tests and labs.
And it's we have that privilege, and it's I'm not saying I would practice differently if I came back. I think it's nice to be able to order some of those things. You do want to be judicious with your use of them, but it's really helpful sometimes. When you can't, when you take that away, then it's like you've got to, get at least as close to the diagnosis as you can with your history and with your physical exam skills. And sometimes, we don't know what exactly we can put together a few things. We might have a differential, but you can't quite get to that final diagnosis in Burundi. And so learning how to be okay with some of that ambiguity is also a skill. And I think if that's something that you would struggle with, then that kind of practice would be really difficult because, I was just visiting with a colleague that's back in Burundi now about a patient, and they got a CBC. It's one of the few labs we can do. We probably, I don't know, maybe a dozen, 8 to 12 labs, but a CBC is one of the labs we can check. And their white count came back, was like 150,000. And their lymphs are, it's majority of lymphs. And so basically, do they have like a lymphoma? Is it leukemia? What exactly is it? And it's probably not good. Could it just be like a leukemoid reaction or, and so then you have to basically take what you have and what you can get and then just kind of do your best and go from there. So really one of the themes for my whole first term was just find out where you're at, do the best you can with what you have and try to take the next step. And that's just what you can do in your practice, your home, your family, with your patients. And I think that applies here too, to, just do the best you can with what you have and try to push it also in the right direction.
Do you feel like your training as an osteopathic physician differentiated you over there, or do you feel like there was do you feel like that made a difference over there?
Yeah, the first time that I did OMT in Burundi, because I teach medical students over there. I don't know if I made that clear or not, but I'm not just in practice over there, and so I was teaching here before I left, and so I joined a group that's doing basically the clinical hospital and outpatient education rotations for a medical school in Burundi. So I have medical students with me over there all the time, and the first time I did OMT, their eyes got real big and like, whoa, tell me about this, what's going on? So they were really excited to see that, because what happened was there was a patient that was having back pain the other thing too is a lot of people, they don't come just for the back pain, because you have to work in your fields and you're providing for your family, and you don't go to the hospital until it's very, very, very bad. But they had come in for something else, and then they were like, oh yeah, and that my back hurts. And so I just was able to diagnose them real quick, give them a quick treatment, and they felt better, and they were able to walk out and move better and feel better. And so I was as you mentioned, the first DO in Burundi, and I'm the only DO on my team, and that it's I practice medicine with the osteopathic philosophy that all these things are connected, and how to use those tenets to guide my care, but then to get to demonstrate that to these Burundian medical students that have never seen this done was a lot of fun. It was fulfilling, and then I think it really piqued their interest too. And I don't have the time to impart all those skills, but there was definitely like, hey, that's a great thing that you can offer your patients.
That's great. You mentioned that we talked about this. You're the first osteopathic physician in Burundi. Was that a difficult process to become licensed in that country?
It really wasn't. I didn't know what it would be like, because depending on the country that you're going to, international osteopathic medicine means something different. Right. You may know, in Europe, osteopaths don't practice like full scope medicine. They just do the manipulation, and they're not prescribing, and they're not the same type of doctors as other medical doctors are. So that's something that's unique to the United States. And so there are certain countries where it's really difficult to get licensed. And so no one had gone through that process in Burundi. So I wasn't sure what would happen, and I just submitted all of my paperwork and diplomas and certificates and training and experiences, and submitted it to the government. It did take some time, but there wasn't much pushback. It just was going through the processes, and then they sent me a Burundian medical license, and said, now go practice. So yeah, I wasn't sure what it would be like. It was a new experience, but it wasn't that difficult, and there wasn't a lot of pushback. Although I know in other parts of Africa, there've been, it's kind of gone back and forth as far as, will they give DOs the medical licenses to practice there or not? But I think when they look at the skills and qualifications, then there's never any question. And in cases where they do that, then they go right through and get licensed. So
Chris asked if there's any hope for future osteopathic training or certification out there in Burundi. If that's something that there's any kind of mass yet. If you're one of one out there, I don't know how many DOs are in that country. What do you think about the future of osteopathic medicine in the country of Burundi might be? Or is it right now they're just hoping for medicine in general?
Yeah, it's interesting because the degree that they graduate with it's not an MD degree either. So it's and it's not exactly like a bachelor's. It's not a master's. It would be hard to translate the medical degree exactly how it would translate into American medicine. But yeah, as far as the future of osteopathic medicine in Burundi, that's yet to be seen. I'm one DO there now, and I'm practicing with that philosophy and sharing that and demonstrating that. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds? That would be interesting. But my primary concern is helping them obtain the medical degree that their medical school bestows, because they need to get that next step. But actually in Burundi, there right now there aren't residencies that are 100% based in Burundi. You can't like stay in Burundi and do your residency and get specialized. In fact, there aren't, or there weren't. I probably should say aren't official internships in Burundi either. So once you graduate medical school, that's the end of your official training, and then you go out and practice. Now you can specialize, but you have to leave the country and go do it somewhere else, if not for the whole time, at least for part of the time that you're in residency. So we started an unofficial internship within the past year, and that's one of the things I'll share my screen again, because that was one of the things that I was going to show you, was the medical students. This is a group of medical interns. So they graduated from the medical school, and then we started with 8, and then we increased it to 12. So we have 12 interns in the program. It's an unofficial internship. It's not officially government sanctioned, but it's a traditional rotating internship. So they're able to get more experience in all the core areas of medicine. And then hopefully what that would do is make them more likely to be a highly qualified candidate for a residency. And then our next step is to hopefully start residencies in Burundi. We would love to see family practice and surgery start there. But you would need an internship to be ready to go into that kind of training anyway. So this is the first group, and they jumped in, and I'm just so proud of them. They just worked really hard this first year, and then they have gone. A couple of them have stayed on, but most of them have gone on to other jobs, whether it's in the government or in private practice in Burundi, but have now that extra years worth of skills. So
that's great, incredible. You're definitely, as I said before, an inspiration for all of us. And I got 2 questions for you. I'll ask the first one is, and I think you kind of answered it, but what advice do you have for the young medical student or the resident in training that wants to get involved in international medicine? If you could sum it down, using your years of wisdom, what would you tell that person that wants to get involved in international medicine?
I would say, follow your dreams and follow the path that you're on. Look for those opportunities. I would encourage them. And I think I pointed out that I didn't know that I was going to be doing this full time until I had some experiences that were short term. I think that both types of missions are important. I think if they're going to go somewhere short term as a way to get introduced to this idea, having had different short term experiences, I would encourage them to go somewhere where there is long term stuff happening. And it's not just kind of you're dropping into a clinic that's going to be there short term and then it'll be gone. Because I didn't see and I didn't feel like that was going to be a successful experience long term. But go into a place where you can have some mentors on the ground over there. Go to a place where you can explore the different types of medicine that you would be practicing. Try to get different experiences, and then just kind of follow your leading. If it's whether it's just something you're interested in, some people go for more just humanitarian reasons. Some are following like a faith calling, but whatever that is, be true to that, and then no matter where you end up, think about ways that you could give back, whether it's here or whether it's I think some people find if they're part of like an indigent clinic or a free clinic or doing something to give back in some way, just that the practice of that, and if you're it's I think it helps you as a physician just to remember why you got into medicine. I think most of us got into medicine because we want to care for people, but then we get bogged down with, EMRs and check boxes and committees, or, the other things that are outside of that demand our time. And so find a way to stay true to why you got into medicine in the first place.
Ryan Farr, it's a great question. He talks about communication being so important in practicing medicine, something that I think was honed in very much in osteopathic medical school, as I'm sure it is in most medical schools. And he asked, what type of issues did you face, both from a language and a cultural standpoint, when it comes to communicating with the patients that you're treating?
That is a great question. And hi, Ryan. And I think, so I had to learn French before I went to Burundi, but that helps me in the hospital, helps me talk with nurses and doctors. Some of the patients know French, but not all of them, because the local language is actually Kirundi. And I mean, I know that's severely limited. I can ask some basic history questions, but I'm not going to have a deep question and be able to counsel someone or, do those kind of things in Kirundi. I can ask, if you're having fever and vomiting and diarrhea and those kinds of things, but they need to be yes or no questions. If they start, I'll ask a question and they start going into a story, and then they've lost me, after a few phrases. So, so having someone with me, and I think that's what helps in teaching then, because I have medical students with me all the time that can help navigate the language, but also the culture, because some of the things that we think might be the right thing to do aren't. And in that culture, like telling someone their diagnosis, like, patient autonomy. Patients have a right to know their diagnosis, and that's something that in our culture we value highly. In other cultures, it's a different value set, and understanding. The first time this happened, I was in the ICU. The first time this happened was in Kenya, actually, before I got to Burundi. But I was trying to give a patient their diagnosis. I had a translator with me, and they were helping explain everything. And I was trying to spell all this out, and it was a bad diagnosis, and it was going to be terminal. And it was kind of bad news that I was trying to share. And I could tell that the translator wasn't saying, it didn't seem like the conversation was going how I thought it would go, but I couldn't understand those exchanges. And so finally then I was like, how is this, what are you saying to them? And they, educated me that you can't say certain things in the ways that I was saying it. So the type of communication is very indirect. We value like direct, just tell me the facts, all these things in American culture. And I had to learn that culturally you talk about things differently, and it's okay. And that, at first there was like this bristling in my, insides, like that can't be right, or that's not good. But it's not a good or bad thing. It's just a difference. It's just a cultural difference that you have to learn about. And that's why they call it culture shock, because you start to experience things are happening that you don't understand, or you think are different, maybe weird. But it's like, why is this happening? You don't understand it because people are operating by rules that aren't written down. We don't have to explain American culture because we all are used to it. In fact, we couldn't. It's rules that are so ingrained, you don't even know that they're rules, and you don't even know how to talk about them. And so then and they have that same thing. And so then when you bump up against it, it's like, oh, that's totally different. but I mean, thankfully, the more you bump up against it, the softer it gets, and the more used to it you get, and you still kind of grapple with it. But yeah, that was just a big change, just kind of learning and adapting to this new culture that you're in. And I know Ryan has served overseas, and so if you want to share, you could type some examples, or anyone, I would invite anyone that's had overseas experiences, if you want to type in a little of where you've served. I'm kind of interested where people have served overseas, if you have, or where you would like to go. So feel free to type in the chat there. But yeah, that's a great question.
Now, Logan, some people that are interested in international medicine might have their own fears about, their health risks to themselves or to their safety, and that might be what's holding them back. I'd like to serve internationally, but I'm worried about, X, Y, Z. Do you have any advice for people like that, or maybe places that they should serve first to kind of get their toes wet, or, what kind of advice would you give to somebody that might be what's holding them back?
Yeah, that's a real personal decision, and you want to serve in a place that you would feel comfortable serving. Burundi, I will say we felt very safe there. The vast majority of the time. We did experience on our compound, it wasn't us personally, but I showed that picture of that group of houses, and about, I don't know, 6 months or so ago, there was an armed robbery on our compound where people came in with guns and had a focused targeted attack on someone, a house of one of our colleagues that lives there, thinking that they would have a large amount of money and they would be able to rob them, and it was a traumatic time especially for them, and they, the father of that family was basically, he was choked and stabbed in his thigh, and intimidated and basically tortured, and trying to demand where money was hidden so that they could steal it. And the other members of the family were there and they had been tied up and were basically watching it. So nothing like that had ever happened before on that compound. But yeah, that was a difficult experience. I will say that things can happen. There are some American cities that are also can be unsafe. So I think no matter where you are in the world, there's no guarantee of your safety. But you want to be in a place where you're going to be comfortable with the risks, that you would be taking, and with your family, especially if you have a family. So,
without being an expert on the situation, and I remember reading those blog posts because they were shared by you and your family. Your organization talked about, this is the first time they dealt with, I think, something of this caliber, which, to me, I think it's just like any kind of medicine. We have to put it into perspective. We deal with some very traumatic experiences, but is that what's going on every day in the world? And what you're sharing is not the norm. It was the exception, which to me says that relatively things are very safe where you've been and where people are serving. But I completely agree with you. There are probably more physicians that are harmed in America, on an overall basis, just from things that occur here than maybe internationally. But I don't have those statistics. I just, I would say that it seems like overall, from what I've read, it's relatively safe.
Yeah, and things can happen, in other countries that are far away from Burundi, and people might email us and say, hey, I heard about this, and are you guys okay? And it's like if there was a shooting in Chicago or something, for someone that lives in Missouri, it's like, yeah, there was some, or, what's happening out west right now with riots and things. It's like, yeah, that is, I mean, it is, that was bad that was happening there, but it's not near me at all. And so, yeah, things, you hear about things in the news, but it's usually far away. Even things in Burundi typically don't happen up in the part of Burundi where we live. So yeah, except for this one experience, I mean, we've been there for, about 5 years and it felt very safe. But that is something to take into consideration. And especially with your kids, and especially with, it's a difficult decision. You need, if you're going to take the kids away from their grandparents, it's hard. And it's nice when the grandparents understand why you're doing it and are on board with it and supportive of you. And, you can stay in touch with Skype and FaceTime and other things like that. But you need, I think having that support helps.
Do you have your organization that's helping you out there? Are they monitoring, safety across the country and stuff for you guys and giving you alerts, if there were, something were to come up?
Yeah. We have a relationship with the embassy in Burundi, and we have our own security team, council that stays abreast of situations. And, we have like different levels of alert. Then we have plans if we needed to evacuate or what we would do. So you need all those preparations for sure.
Great. Well, we're getting towards the end of our time here. Does anybody that's on the attendees have any more questions? Feel free to enter them into the chat. Because we do have a few more minutes here. We talked briefly about your kids. How have they adapted being out there? What's their experience been like?
Yeah, it's really, it's a great experience. I'm so glad that they're able to have this experience and kind of realize what the majority of the world lives like. I mean, the United States is really a bubble. And it's not, when you talk about the majority world, most people are living a much different life than what we see every day. And so it's good to be open, have your eyes open to that. So I think, early on, one of the experiences that the boys had was they'd had a soccer ball, but they saw the kids out there playing with a soccer ball they had made out of like plastic bags and tape and, things like that. And so just grappling with that, and, they made toys. I mean, they basically didn't want to play with the soccer ball, and they wanted to make a soccer ball out of things. And so they made their own soccer ball, and they play with, sticks and rocks and climb trees, and the lifestyle that they're living, and our lifestyle too. I mean, how you prepare meals and, do laundry and live your life. It's like stepping back about 50 years or something, to the way your parents grew up, or maybe even their parents, depending on how old you are. So I think there's, you're giving up some things, but I think the things that you're getting in exchange for it are just really valuable and kind of intangible, but really special. And I'm thankful that they're having this opportunity to grow up like this. And I hope that, and I think they are too, and they miss their friends there. They miss our house there and things that we would do there. So I think they, I was one thing coming back with COVID, I was like, normally we would be going to Chuck E. Cheese and Incredible Pizza and, all these places, and we're not. And so I think, honestly, that is kind of helping them miss Kabuye more than if they were, because that's one of the things that they really enjoy about being back in the States. And I always wonder, like, okay, are they going to want to go back? Are they going to be ready to go back when it's time? And so they were already asking about it the other day, like, when are we going back? So we're planning to go back in January. And again, that it kind of depends on just what's happening with COVID and the world and everything. So, but that's our plan.
Well, that's wonderful. It does sound like a unique opportunity for them. Logan, thank you again for your time here. You're helping all those people over in Burundi, but I also think you have a special mission with us as well, because it helps us, see a little part of the world that you're doing. So, on behalf of MAOPS, just want to thank you for,
your service, your sacrifice, and your example of being an osteopathic medicine outside of the state of Missouri, outside of the United States, and in Africa over there. So thank you again for that example. It's truly just, I think we feel blessed by knowing you and sharing it, and even if we just get a little small taste of it. So thank you for sharing that. You, and I would say especially your wife as well, which I think you would agree with, since she obviously is supporting you here with your children and you. So thank you very much for you and your family.
Yeah, she's really the reason that we can be sustainable over there, and she helps us all, keep going. But yeah, I mean, MAOPS, thank you guys so much. It's, I think as osteopaths, I don't know what it is, but it's, there's been this kind of unique, openness to serving in this way. And I'm really thankful to Brian Bowles and Chris Bowles and all the home office staff, and you and other past presidents and their support. Yeah, I mean, it's an honor to talk with you and to have been supported by MAOPS in the past, and to be able to share about what we're doing there. Yeah, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, and be sure if you're attending this conference to please fill out the post surveys, and make sure you give Dr. Banks some pretty high ratings, because he definitely deserves it. So as Jeff is sharing with you, we will definitely try to get this up on YouTube as well, so that we can share with other individuals, and those that would like to see me credit will also make that available for different individuals at DOCME. So thank you again, and everybody have a wonderful evening. Thanks, Logan.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And thanks everyone for attending. Have a good night.